There we go. So hello and welcome to another segment of Intersections, Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. My name is Elisa Gwilliam, and today I have the pleasure to be speaking with Executive Director of Mental Health America Dutchess, Andrew O'Grady, and Professor of Psychology and Director of the Center of Aging and Disability Policy at Mount St. Mary College, and co-founder of NOAR, the National Organization of Adult Addiction and Recovery, Dr. Larry Force. And our special guest today joining us is Vance Larson, and he's a life coach and Renaissance man that you'll be hearing a lot more about as we begin our conversation entitled Voice of the Listener. Andrew, you want to get us started?
Yeah, this is great. I'm glad we're back again. And Vance is going to be a great guest, a friend of Larry's. And I'm just really happy to be here again with all of you right before the holidays, where we're talking about breaking down silos, and we're talking about staying in recovery through the holiday season and how difficult that can be, and making sure that everybody has a voice to connect to if they need something. And we're hoping that our conversations generate that. I've received numerous emails. I didn't forward you 2 emails I got today, you guys, that were from people who are really, truly enjoying our shows here. We had somebody comment on last week's guest saying that she didn't realize how little she knew about addiction until she watched that, and she really wants to learn more, and she's just learning so much from all of these episodes that we tape. So I'm just really excited. And Dr. Larry Force has been in my life since I went to Mount St. Mary College, and I joked that he was a 65-year-old professor at the time, and I was a young 21-year-old college student, but that's not true. You were probably 25, and I was 21. I don't know how old you were, but Larry was a professor at the Mount when I was there, and as I weaved through my career, we connected again, and it's a nice connection. So Larry brings a lot to this. He's taught me tons about making connections and linking people to people, and I'm just blessed to have you in our life, in my life. So Larry, I'll turn it over to you.
Really, Andrew, thank you so much. And Alyssa, thank you for, again, weaving this together, for moderating it and then lighting it up on social media. As Alyssa indicated, my name is Dr. Larry Force, and I'm a professor of psychology at Mount St. Mary College and director of the Center on Aging and Disability Policy with my dear friend, Dr. Jeffrey Kahana. We are so glad to be involved in this. And, I've received some of those emails that you have forwarded. We know that we're making an impact. And what was the idea? The idea was, look, addiction paths alone can be isolating. Addiction paths alone during COVID can be super isolating. And the fact is that recovery is a path that's not one of isolation. And we wanted to be able to bring this issue of addiction and recovery to a national level. And I think we've been pretty successful at it. As Alyssa indicated, myself and 2 friends and colleagues, Jim Ball and Dave Brinkerhoff, we founded a national organization of adult addictions and recovery about 5 years ago, because we knew that there was an abyss, there was a gap in being able to deliver services that were developmentally appropriate, for somebody in adulthood and moving through the stages of adulthood. So it's based upon a theory called the theory of dimensionality. We developed a practice orientation, we developed a program, and programs are great to develop, but then you have to go implement them. And Andrew and I reconnected. I said, look, this is what we have. These are my friends. I connected the 2 of them together with Andrew. And the next thing you know, we beta tested this in a number of group homes. We're still doing it. It's called Intersections, a program without boundaries. It's not to replace, things like AA and FEL. There's so many doors to go in. This is to help supplement it. And, we're here from NOAR, and we would not be here, without Joan Kaplan and the Kaplan Family Foundation supporting the development and the launch of NOAR. And we would not be here if it wasn't for Andrew O'Grady as Executive Director of Mental Health Dutchess supporting the program. So it's all about connections. So tonight, as Alyssa had indicated, Vance Larson has joined us. And let's talk about full disclosure. Vance is a Renaissance man. I'm a big believer, as Andrew said, about connections. So I use LinkedIn, and I use LinkedIn a lot. And through that, I've made some tremendous connections, across the period of time. And, there were periods in my life, as all of us, that you just need somebody to talk to. You just need somebody to listen. And the fact is that there are times that, psychotherapy can be helpful. And there are times that you know what the issue is, and you just need somebody to talk and help you frame out with some clarity. And I was looking around for a person like that. And because of LinkedIn, I connected with Vance. And it was great, and it continues to flourish and grow. And I'm telling you right now, as you get to hear him and hear his perspective, which resonates in my head, I've referred family members, I've referred friends, I've been on the phone, as a regular, as a regular contact with him. I like the fact that he comes to the table with a mental health background. I like the fact that he comes to the table with spirituality. I like the fact that he comes to the table with martial arts as a background. And I like the fact that he comes to the table with an open heart. And I am so proud that he is able to join us tonight and that I have the opportunity to introduce him. So with that, Vance, I'd like to welcome you. And, maybe you could just provide, 35, 45-second overview of, how you got to be in the position that you are, because, people, you have a following. One day I was talking to Vance and I said to him something about, I was almost puffed. I have like 16,000 connections on LinkedIn, social media. And my youngest guy, Patrick, used to say to me, Dad, they're not your friends. Okay. And I know that they're not my friends. Okay. But now we both have a different perspective of the value that that network brings to the table. And I'm sitting there, and I said to Vance, it's something about 16,000 on social media. He said, yeah, that's good. He said, I have 98,000. I was like, oh, okay. And he does have 98,000 plus and growing. So Vance, welcome. And we'd like to hear from you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is very important work, and it's a great voice, and it's a great tool that you all have put in place. We've thrown around the word full transparency, and right out of the gate, I'm going to tell you all right now that 13 months ago, almost to the day, my daughter passed away from heroin. And that was a pivotal moment in my life. I don't know why. You asked me what brought me to where I am in life right now. I don't know. I mean, in high school for career day, I never signed up and wanted to be a counselor or a psychotherapist or anything like that. The long and the short of it was like the late 80s. And I saw a little blurb in the Penny Saver. I'm dating myself. It was a little advertisement. And it was about HIV and AIDS. And I had no connection to that world, to that community. I just felt like at that time, the government, the churches, families were being torn apart. No one was really doing anything about people living with, or at that time, people dying with AIDS. And so I volunteered. And very quickly, I was taking people to support groups, taking them to doctor's appointments, just sitting there. And in the late 80s, I mean, essentially the life expectancy was about 6 months. So I was attending a lot of funerals. And it was through the HIV, as the progression of the disease evolved, almost all of my clients, in fact, in 20 years of working crisis work with the HIV community, there was always that co-occurring disorder or the addiction component. So very quickly, very early on, I had to get educated about addiction. And so I spent 20 years as a crisis counselor, and then I left that field because you can only hold so many people died before it starts to take a toll on you. And I walked away and got into consulting and did some EAP work. And Yeah, so it was just, what got me here, divine intervention. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Um, and it's at age 55, I find myself trying to unlearn all that I've learned so I can be more transparent, more receptive, more aware of that connection with the person who is suffering. So, and that's kind of me in a nutshell.
And when you go ahead, Andrew.
No, I'm just really sorry to hear about your daughter, and
Thank you.
that's tragic. And I read a little bit about you on LinkedIn, and you have 1 million followers, but we have 335 in common. That's pretty rare.
Hey.
But I read some about the work you've done, even since you just mentioned the 80s, but even now you're still doing the care management and the housing stuff, right? So that's dear to my heart, and we try to make these episodes, relevant to everybody. Clearly, you've worked. Your field has been in similar with mine, working with people in poverty and struggling with housing issues and needing case management. And I applaud anybody that's a case manager. I mean, that's the hardest job there is, and sometimes it's thankless. And sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's pretty wonderful. You got to hang on to those pieces where somebody actually acknowledges that you were there when nobody else was, because people are struggling when they're in poverty. They're not always, finding the breath to say thank you. They're just, finding a breath to get to the next breath, and that's where you come in. So, I'm just thankful for people like you.
Well, and I appreciate that. I mean, yes, case management. While I'm doing that, that's I'm up every morning at 4:30. I start my day, and I don't genuinely end my day until around 11 or 12 at night. So it's around the clock. In addition to all that, my wife is disabled, and so I'm her caregiver as well. So it's a long day. But I say that to say this: with the case management, yes, it's thankless work. It's long hours. But there's a piece, and I really don't talk about it too often, partly because of non-disclosures and things of that nature. But I've been blessed that as a consultant, I've worked in some very prestigious institutions for addictions. I've worked with celebrities. I've worked with professional athletes. And I've also worked in, the state-run institutions where you go in and you just pray to God that you don't get knifed at the end of the day. And, it's, for me, working with an addict, whether they come from a place of privilege or whether they have been institutionalized and they've never had an opportunity to excel in life. That one common denominator that I've always found is that it didn't make a difference if you were in a $30,000 a month rehab or if you were in a state-run facility. The person that applied themselves, that was open to looking at their trauma, those tend, in my experience, those are the people that they would tend to succeed versus. And again, it's not to make a sweeping generalization, but some of the higher class clientele that I've worked with, they have been surrounded with privilege, and some cases they didn't have to really take a hard look at themselves. Everything was kind of handed to them, or they could just kind of move through the life. But the addiction process, that's probably the hardest process, I believe, on the face of the planet, to actually, take a hard look at yourself, take a look at where you came from, to apply yourself to trying to rectify some of those traumas and find some peace. I mean, that's soul-wrenching stuff,
I appreciate you saying that, Larry. I'm sorry I'm jumping in again, but
Oh, no, please.
I appreciate you saying that, because one of the things we're doing on a small level, and we hope to replicate throughout the country, is that within my agency, we're showing these videos we have 3 halfway houses for people in recovery. and they're not state run, they're not for profit run, but they're essentially state run. They're not $30,000
Right.
a month. They're free. And so we want people in those houses to hear that. And your message that you just said was tremendous. It doesn't matter where you came from, how much money you had, whether you're paying $30,000 or not. It's if you apply yourself and you want it bad enough, it'll happen.
Well, yeah, and it's especially doing work, crisis work, and as a first response chaplain, for example. I was being interviewed a few years ago with one of the local news organizations, and it was this new program, and it was a lot of state officials and a lot of hand holding and a lot of publicity, and a lot of money is being thrown around. And this reporter, she walks over to me and she goes, so tell me, Reverend Larson, what is your plan to save all these people? And I laughed and I said, my job isn't to save them. My job is to love them. I'm not in the saving business. I'm here to make a human connection and to let you know that you're valid, that there's something inside of you that's worth fighting for. And maybe you don't see that, but maybe together we can get there.
Yeah, wonderful.
I asked you in our conversations across time, could you teach people to do what you do because you do it so well? We've talked about that. And one of the themes that you've brought to the table that you and I have discussed too, which I love, is this idea of really challenging the person to think about what's non-negotiable in your life. I love that term.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about, the issue of never giving up, and then all of a sudden you start to resonate with the work you've done with Special Forces and the framing it out and never giving up, working the problem, but the importance of renewal, relaxation. We know that, in the classes that I teach in theories of social casework, one of the things I say at the very beginning is, hey, listen, we're not looking for sprinters. We're looking for long distance runners, because in this field, typically, why are people running towards us? They're running towards us because things aren't going well. Okay. And then the question is, what do you do with that stuff? I always reference the fact that at one point in one of the institutions I was working in, I had about a 55-minute to an hour drive. That sounds, like a burden. It was wonderful. It was an opportunity to decompress. I mean, if I walked out of that institution and walked into my kitchen table, it would have been a whole different scene if I didn't have the opportunity to put on the radio, roll down the window, stop for a cup of coffee, listen to some talk radio music, because of the fact that you have to figure out how to take care of yourself. But maybe you could just talk for a moment about, because I think it's such an important concept, this idea of what's non-negotiable, and then how do you go about, moving from there forward? The concept of non-negotiable.
Well, the non-negotiable for me is because I live my life, at least I try to live my life at a level which is, I guess, going to not only produce results, but produce peace. And as we go through the course of the day, especially in this type of work, I mean, we are all caregivers and we're professional support people, and we're constantly pouring out. And so what are we doing to replenish ourselves? And for me, the whole concept of non-negotiables was I wanted to do something for myself a minimum of 3 times a day, which was a way of validating myself, my existence, my creativity, my wife, my spirituality. And so it's a way of anchoring and pouring into myself. So I mentioned I'm up every morning, between 4 and 4:30. I'm in the gym typically at 4:30, and I get about 45 minutes in. And the reason why I do that is I don't know what the day is going to hold for me. I'm a case manager in the day, I'm a coach at night, and I'm a consultant at night. And then I'm taking care of my wife. I mean, thank God she's on the upswing and she can take care of herself for the most part now. But so I'm constantly giving my energy, my creativity, my love my passion away. And so I wanted to invest in myself. So that workout was, it's spiritual, but it's physical, but it's just a way of prioritizing that I'm number one. I'm doing this for me. The second non-negotiable for me is I make a point to get an hour of uninterrupted time with my wife every day. She has been my greatest cheerleader to her 7 surgeries, to literally having to revive her twice. I mean, we've been through some things. You know, there isn't a day that goes by that I can't thank God enough for that relationship. So I want to invest in that, and I want her to feel that she is the most important thing in my life, next to my connection to the Creator. And then the third piece is that connection to the Creator. And, you know, I end the night every night in some form of meditation. You know, every now and again, I may just, you know, do some affirmations. Not that I subscribe to any particular religion at this point. I mean, I'm equally comfortable in a chapel, a mosque, you know, a temple. But, you know, whether I'm saying the rosary, whether I'm doing the malas, whether I'm just chanting, I'm just doing something that is just expression, the gratitude for the day and the experience. And, you know, Larry, you talked about that drive, that 55-minute drive. And for me, that's kind of that same process. You know, I'm not driving, but metaphorically, I'm moving, I'm going somewhere, and I'm emptying the mind, and I'm just kind of being aware of what has happened, what's important, and what I need to focus on. So it's for me, the non-negotiables are a way of setting the day, validating the work that I do, validating this precious thing that we have, life. So did I answer that, or did I miss the second piece of the question?
No, you got it. You hit it out of the park.
Okay.
I want to blend in a discussion around 2 images that we always use. Alyssa, would you be able to bring up the first one? When we were off camera before we came on, I was introducing you to both Alyssa and to Andrew. And I was saying that you know, Andrew is a strong advocate of tear down those walls. This is a building, main building of a psych center in New York, in our county. And in June, I was driving down the street and I saw this going on a Saturday afternoon, that this thing was being torn down. So I made a U-turn and took the picture and then tagged it. You know, mental health at its best, the tearing down of walls. That's the way we used to do business. You know, you've been listening a long time. You know, the theme of today is the voice of the listener. You've been listening a long time, and even the references you made about working inside in state institutions, working with people of privilege, working with people that are on, you know, state coffers. I mean, you've seen a lot of different scenarios. The good news about this picture is that they are tearing it down. We do business differently. Alyssa, could you bring up the second picture? This picture, you know, as I introduced Andrew, he's the executive director of mental health Mental Health Dutchess County, Mental Health America, Dutchess County. And the fact is that, Andrew, maybe you could just give a little quick snapshot of that bell. You're muted. You're muted.
That bell is right down where you live, and it's down in Alexandria, Virginia, and it's at the National MHA site. You may have even seen it. Who knows? You might have gone to a conference where they've had that bell. But that bell was cast from the shackles and the chains at various institutions that were, you know, doing things the way they thought were right, but they weren't. And Clifford Beers, who was the founder of MHA, took all those shackles and chains, and he forged this bell, and they ring it at our annual conference every year in Washington, D.C. And it's a fantastic bell, and it represents so many things. You know, you work in a system similar to the ones my agency works in, and the silos. You got the shackles, and we're learning how to do things differently and treat people differently. And love, as you point out, is right there on the forefront. and you have to have that. And but there's also many problems with the system of care that we have. And if you have an addiction, you have to go here, and you can't talk to this person, even though they might be perfect for you. And you have to go through this door to get to this door, and people probably call you all the time, as they do Larry and I. Who do you recommend I call or I go to? Well, if I'm recommending the public clinic, I know it's going to be about 4 weeks before they get a prescription for a mild antidepressant. If I want to do a private clinician, I have to worry that they're going to call me back and say, my insurance didn't cover it, or this, that. It's not easy to access care, and there's too many barriers, and we have 1 million clinicians all over the place, and we should be using them intertwined. We should all be working together, and we're not. So there's a lot of problems in the system, and this isn't to solve the problems in the system, but it's to make things, come to the forefront. And there are people in high levels of government, OMH and OASAS, that watch this, and I'm sure they would agree. But we got to work toward making it a better system.
And the reason I really wanted to place emphasis on the bell is because from where I sit, this is your handiwork. People come to you with shackles, personal shackles, and you help them. Like you said, I'm not there to fix people. I'm there to love people. When I first reached out to you through LinkedIn, and I realized that I wanted to talk to somebody. I wasn't looking for psychotherapy. I just wanted somebody to listen. And then, I was working on projects, and I was thinking about time management, and I figured, well, let me look over here at Life Coach. And then we found each other. And the other thing is that in my introduction, I didn't give you enough credit for this, but you really are a social influencer, like it or not, wear it well or not. And the reason is because of the fact that if you're on LinkedIn and you're following you 4 or 5 times a day, okay, boom, there you are with a strong, powerful, very direct message. Okay, it's not all about look at this and you're going to just feel wonderful. It's look at this and you're going to feel real. And the imagery that you use and the powerful messages, you really are a crafter of a bell, but it's not out there. It's internal. It's the way I'm a different person as a result of my connection with you.
Well,
we talk about disclosure. There's the disclosure. I am definitely a different person in a better way, a more integrated way, as a result of you listening.
I appreciate that. I very much do. And it goes both ways. For me, because I believe I told you this, when you first reached out, I didn't tell you this. I wasn't sure I wanted to take on another client. And honestly, this might, be cutting my own throat metaphorically, professionally. About 40% of my practice are mental health professionals, MDs, clergy, and they're coming to me for a very specific reason. And Larry and I, we spoke a little bit about this last night. Because I gave up all of my certifications, all my license. I don't have to report to insurance companies. There's no diagnosis codes. I can protect security clearances. And obviously when we get into that area where, that person would need a prescription, or, we're getting into some deep co-occurring disorders, bipolar and things of that nature, that's when I, use some wraparound services and get them the appropriate help that they need. But the fact that when I accepted you, Larry, I was hesitant, but I was aware. And that first conversation was all that I needed to know, that it was a two-way street. I mean, I believe that I was giving you some space to kind of work through some things, but at the same standpoint, I think that's what we all do in a sense. I think that we're partnering on the journey. And if I was sitting in a power position, or if you're sitting in that power position, and I'm not taking away from psychotherapists or anybody else, but for me, I like it to be a partnership. I think that kind of takes the pressure off. It kind of gives, it's tearing down the walls. We're equals. We're on this journey together. And for me, I think that's kind of been the greatest success that I have had in every aspect of my life, and with every relationship, whether it's family, whether it was, professional relationships. And Larry and I would just use this in a conversation the other day. We were chatting with an individual, and I said to the individual, look, let us build rapport before we build businesses. And to me, that's kind of how I approach the addictions, piece of the work that I do. Is I want to connect with you prior to getting into, the agenda of what is your journey going to look like? Is it 12 steps? Is it disease model, behavior model, harm reduction, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's a great philosophy.
It really is a great philosophy. And that's why I've said to you, is there a way that you could teach people to do what you're doing? Because what happens is that, and Andrew and I see this all the time, people come in, especially when you come into the field, you got the eyeglasses of a particular theoretical orientation.
Right.
And you're going to practice that, whether it fits or not. That's what you're going to practice early on.
Yeah.
And the fact is, then as you become more seasoned and more experienced, you realize, what, maybe that's not the best approach based upon this circumstance. And then in your case, you've built a community, a constituency.
Well, and that kind of ties into what I said earlier. I have a lot of education, and I'm trying to unlearn it all. I just want to get back to simplicity at its finest. I don't want to overcomplicate life. Life is complicated enough as it is. And while education, I believe, is important, I think for me, just in terms of the addiction piece, I, like many people, had some troubling years, as a young man. And, I guess clinically, if I were to have sat in front of a physician, which I did at one point, and he said, Vance, long story short, you're going to be dead in 2 years because you're drinking to the extent that I was. And it was almost 2 years later that I found myself in a hospital, and I was chained up to a gurney, and, grand mal seizures, alcohol poisoning, all that. And they gathered the family around, and they said, your son's dying tonight. And I'll never forget, I looked at my mom and I said, I'm never drinking again. And not only that, I'm leaving the hospital tomorrow. And I did. And I never went to AA. I never took medication. I never saw a psychotherapist. I went back to what resonated with me, and that was the martial arts and the meditation piece of that. And that awareness by saying, okay, examining, why am I feeling this way today? And that was very powerful for me. It was almost like me reclaiming that, I had a stake in my actions. I could do something about that. And so when we talk about addiction, there are many ways that people can recover, and there's no one right way. I think you have to look at all of those pieces, and you may pull from bits and pieces, kind of like religion or spirituality. And if it works for you, then do that. And there should be no judgment upon that. If someone is doing something to better themselves, honor that, cheer for them, give them that space to find what works for them. Unfortunately, as Larry said, sometimes we are just coming out of school and we have focused on this one modality, and that's what you're going to do. It doesn't work that way in life.
Yeah, that's the message of intersections. We have 6, Larry has designed or developed or laid out 6 key models that people should follow. But we've talked repeatedly that it doesn't have to be those 6 key models. It could be anything. It could be martial arts. That's not necessarily there. Movement is there, but it could
Sure.
be anything that somebody wants to do as long as it's positive. and it's helping themselves. So this is great. This was a great conversation. And you've been
And I just for a disclaimer, I do appreciate the acknowledgement, but those modules were really developed and framed out from a conversation and exchange with Jim Ball, Dave Brinkerhoff, and myself over time. It was like we were all in the kitchen cooking, and everybody had their own recipe, and we threw different things in, and we're very proud of what we've been able to create. But again, it would have been created and sat on the shelf or on the counter if it hadn't been for you. So, tip of the hat.
well.
Right. So look, I think message delivered, mission accomplished. Any other thing we want to say? I knew all along, as I was talking to Andrew and Alyssa about the fact that you were going to, join us tonight. I knew all along that this was going to be as powerful as it was.
Well, I appreciate that. And listen, more people need to be doing this type of work, especially now, I believe, within the pandemic. I mean, I told Larry, literally my practice has 5x'd since, May.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. People, they're social distancing, thank God that they are, but they're getting inside their heads and they haven't had an opportunity to process trauma or whatever it is that they're dealing with, or they're just trying to figure out who they are because they're social distancing. And so people are reaching out. And so what you all are providing is necessary. And thank God that you're doing it. It's a tip of the hat to you guys. It really, I mean, I'm honored to be a part of this conversation. So thank you.
Thanks so much. So Alyssa?
Yeah, well, thank you, Vance. It was nice getting to know you a little bit better tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. You've been listening to another segment of Intersections Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange Holiday Edition. And if you'd like to listen to this again or comment on it or share it with friends, you can log on to the Digital Resource Center on our website, www.intersections-exchange.org. And there you can also follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And make sure you sign up for our newsletter so you never miss an episode of Intersections Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange.
And before we go, could I just say one thing?
Oh, yes.
I'd like to be able to give Vance the opportunity to be able to put out some contact points.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Vance, how can people get a hold of you if they would like to be your friend on LinkedIn or contact you directly?
The easiest thing to do would just be to type in Vance Larson, life coach, and you'll find me numerous places. I write for many publications and things of that nature. Honestly, the best way to get a hold of me would just be to call me directly or shoot me a text and just say that you'd like a quick discovery call, and I can be reached at 410-533-6219. I'm on the East Coast, so anytime up until 10, maybe 11 o'clock at night. Just reach out.
All right.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all. Really great job. Great message. Thank you, Vance.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.